So we have some great options here. So we have lowercase on the left, uppercase on the right, and I like the way the lowercase feels. It feels softer, more approachable. The ones on the right feel stronger in strength. So let's see if we can't touch up the spacing and the kerning between each character, because right now it's just default spacing. So I'm going to take one that I feel like I had some time to kind of think about font and type choices, and I decided to stick with a serif typeface to give it a little bit more of a traditional look. We're going to be using gold. We're going to have a very nice traditional simple symbol, and I do think having a serif in this case could work better to elevate the brand. So I'm going to eliminate any sans serif font choices. So that kind of helps us narrow it down. We got to continue to narrow down options or we're going to feel very overwhelmed. So as you enter in each phase, eliminate things as you feel like they're not fitting. Just delete it, get it out of your mind. So here's some options. I want to take some of these uppercase, and when we studied our design theory, that sometimes adding spaces between characters can give it an elegant high-end look. So let's do the same thing here. We're going to go up to our character panel and we're just going to add a little bit of tracking. Just adding some default tracking, and we can kern it, which means we manually change the spaces. We could do that a little bit later, but I know with this is kind of more of an introduction to logo design, so we're not going to get as detailed as I would in say other classes, but just kind of a little introduction. So here's how these look. So this is the highest contrast between the lines, the thickness and thinness here. And feeling like when I zoom out, there's really thin parts of the typography, they get a little lost. And so I'm just going to go ahead and eliminate it because I don't think it's as practical as I'd like it to be. So now we only have two options. We probably have the same problem down here on the Dido. As wonderful and traditional as Dido is, it's got that same problem. It looks really great when it's large, and that's why you see it on mastheads on high fashion magazines. It is really large, but Dido doesn't really do really good when it's tiny. See, when I zoom out, it's not very strong. So eliminating that. So just like that, we were able to refine and pick our font choice, which is going to be Georgia. And I love the wider spacing, and I'm thinking this is weak compared to this. I mean, I like how this looks for some other applications, maybe a different logo or a different company. But I think in this case, we want something pretty strong that can, what I like about this is it's even. It's got the same cap height and X height right here. So it just kind of feels more geometric. It feels more like even on the top and the bottom and the left and the right. The lowercase, it has these little gaps that are naturally created. And I just feel like this is more geometric. It can align perfectly a little bit better. So let's continue to refine. Let's create a couple copies, and let's get some different spacing or tracking right here, tracking between the characters. So right now and I'm just right here in my character panel, and I'm going right down here to tracking, and you can manually put in whatever number you want. Let's try some really wide spacing, just typing in a number. So very wide spacing, and we can even try tighter spacing. Let's do 200. And this is where we get to kind of go, okay, well, what's too wide? What's too short? When you have too much spacing between characters, it starts to be disconnected, and sometimes wide spacing has a nice effect. In this case, I think that's too much. But I also think that this is too little. So I feel like we have a Goldilocks situation where we have too big, too little. Let's find kind of something in the middle. So I'm thinking this might work with maybe a little more spacing. So I think I'm figuring out that 400 might be kind of the sweet spot, not too wide and not too little. So that's kind of how I discovered kind of the gaps here. You can manually change the spacing between these characters. What you're going to have to do though is instead of having them be one line here all connected as live type, you're going to have to copy each one of these and create, I'm just holding down Option and dragging, and kind of type in each letter. And this is going to be too complicated for this particular project, so we're not going to get in detail, but I'm just kind of showing you how you do that. And then you would slide these around to find the right kerning and spacing between each little character. But we're going to stick with the default tracking for now. And now we have some symbols. We have a typography choice. We're ready to combine these. We're trying to find the right balance and size between logo symbol and logo type. Everything is coming together really quickly now that we got through the brainstorming process. And I'm excited to continue further. So let's combine symbols here. I am going to pick one. Let's go ahead and pick this one right here. And we can refine this as well. And how I created this symbol, you can kind of see the brainstorming process behind the symbol. But I did what I went ahead and flipped on grid. So you go to view and you go to show grid. And I was able to take this basic shape and I just kind of got my pen tool and I just traced right here a simple triangle. So it was probably one of the simple, easiest shapes I came up with. But I think it has strength. It has a geometric part. It has a triangle. I think it could work really nice as a symbol. And of course, our symbols are not finalized yet. We haven't played around with stroke weight yet. We haven't played around with color. We could still tweak everything at this point. So now that we have our grid, and if you ever want to turn on your grid, just go up to View, and you can hide and show your grid. There's even a little handy shortcut, keyboard shortcut that I'm going to be using off and on to hide and show a grid. Do you have to use grids? No, you can eyeball it. You can find different ways to do it. I like to have smart guides on. So I'm going to go up to View and I'm going to get my smart guides on, which I've reviewed a little bit in the past, but smart guides are great because I can kind of eyeball it, but it does give you a little help with those little pink indicator lines. Like if I wanted to find the center point between this and this symbol, I can drag it and then find that center point right there. It's going to kind of snap for you. And so now we have to think about balance between these two things. And while I'm doing this, I can also kind of line everything up to the grid. So you see kind of the M is at that point of the grid, and the E, I can drag that and make that a bump up to the left, and then make sure this is bumped up here. So now that I know the grid is intact, let's talk about balance. So you never want the symbol to overpower the typography and vice versa. So if I have a big old symbol, and I see a lot of students do this, this is why I bring it up. So let's kind of bring this down here, or bring both of these down here so we can have some room. So a lot of times I have students do this, and they're like, here's my logo. And I go, okay, I love both elements, but the balance is off. If you zoom out, you're not going to be able to really, the name is an afterthought. And in logo design, names are so important. The company name and readability of a company really is priority. So you never want that to happen. You never want this gigantic symbol to overwhelm the typography. And then I'll have people do this and be like, all right, I have a logo. And then this is just almost looks like another character. It almost looks like a mistake because it's a small little thing. It's competing with the size of each character, so it's not standing out at all. So it's about finding the balance between the two. And some designers, they are more precise and they use a ratio. So I'm going to do, this is 100%, and I'll do 60% of the width of the typography. And I'm kind of one who likes to eyeball it and feel it. So this is called optical adjustment, which just means I manually adjust it with my eye to see what works right for balance. So sometimes it helps to zoom out, maybe make it a slightly bigger. So anytime I feel like the symbol's getting bigger, just make it smaller. So that could be a nice balance. I want to zoom out. I want the name to be really the first thing you see and the symbol to be complementary of the typography. So once again, we can make sure we have it aligned in the center, and the grid kind of helps us with that. And the smart guides really help. And we also want to make sure we have some nice spacing between the logo element and the typography. Right now I think that's a really good balance. Some people like to have it real close, and to me that makes me anxious. That makes the viewer anxious when you have these elements so close together, and then disconnected is when it's a little too far apart. So we have another Goldilocks situation where we don't want too far, we don't want too tight, we want to have something just about right. You can use the grid to make it precise, or you can be like me. I don't feel like I want to have the grid always as a rule. It can help you, but I don't want to. I want to be able to find the feeling and the right balance. Maybe just tucking it. I'm just using my top arrow key, and I'm just going to nudge it a little higher till I feel like it's at a good moment. And this will happen with time. The more logos you do, the more you'll be able to eyeball it. And when you first start out, you may be being more precise and using grids. You might feel like that's more helpful to you. But once you've done it a while, you'll start to kind of get used to what looks good and what pairs well together. So now that we have good balance, let's try out different symbols and different weight thicknesses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing that I've done before. I'm going to make some duplicates. I'm going to turn off my grid for now because right now it's just a little distracting. So just turning it off. And I can replace symbols, I can modify symbols. So we can bring in our little leaf design. And we can find out what we think. And I'm going to go ahead and eliminate this option. This one right here, it's just not looking good from afar. It's looking too complicated. I'm going to stick with just one symbol. So you might just decide to eliminate something after you look at it and go, you know what, compared to the others, it's just not good enough. I'm just going to go ahead and delete it. So we're just holding down Option and dragging to create a quick duplicate. And you can see how quickly you can put all these together. You can see this is really a fun process. I really, really enjoy logo design. It's one of my favorite things to do as a graphic designer. So continuing to put these in place. So we have kind of some different options here.